structure is so enormous it's hard to get your head round. And most of it is underwater.
From hauling towering oil platforms across the seas to transporting massive road-ready space shuttles, the world of engineering has seen some truly mind-blowing feats. Strap in and get ready as we dive into the incredible stories behind the largest and heaviest objects ever moved by human ingenuity. They see me trolling. At an astonishing 1,549 feet tall, the Troll. A platform located in the middle of the North Sea is a towering marvel of engineering. Designed to extract natural gas from the Troll gas field, this colossal structure is nearly as tall as Central Park Tower, the 15th tallest building in the world. However, most of its height remains hidden beneath the surface, as its 4 massive legs extend nearly 1,000 feet down to the seafloor. But how did such an enormous structure end up in the middle of the ocean? The journey of Troll A began in a dock near the village of Vats on Norway's western coast. Its 4 legs were first constructed and then filled with water, submerging them almost entirely. The platform itself was towed over these submerged legs and floated into position above them. Once aligned, the water was carefully pumped out, gradually lifting the legs and bringing them into place beneath the platform. By May 1995, Troll A was ready for its next phase. The incredible task of transporting the 1.2 million-ton structure from Vats to its final location at the Troll gas field over 120 miles away. This Herculean effort required 10 tugboats generating 130,000 horsepower. Due to the platform's immense size, the convoy moved at a snail's pace of just 2 miles per hour, taking an exhausting 7 days to complete the journey. Upon arrival, the legs were once again filled with water, allowing them to sink and anchor firmly onto the seabed almost 1,000 feet below. Suction buckets at the base of the structure created a permanent vacuum seal, ensuring stability. Once secured, the water was pumped out of the legs one last time, finalizing this monumental operation. Now that's what you call a long haul. Supersized space shuttle. When you think of space shuttles, you probably picture rockets soaring through orbit at mind-blowing speeds. But for the Space Shuttle Endeavour, its final journey was decidedly more down to earth. From 1992 to 2011, Endeavour completed 25 missions, visiting extraordinary destinations like the International Space Station and the Hubble Space Telescope. However, its last trip wasn't to the stars. It was a 9-mile road trip from Los Angeles International Airport, LAX, to the California Science Center. Sounds simple compared to launching into orbit, right? Not quite. At 86 tons, the Endeavour was far too heavy for a helicopter, and dismantling the shuttle would have caused irreversible damage. Instead, the California Science Center invested a whopping $10 million to transport the shuttle overland, a monumental task in its own right. The shuttle's massive dimensions, 122 feet long and 78 feet wide, posed another challenge. Many of Los Angeles' streets simply couldn't accommodate it. After careful planning, engineers mapped out a 12-mile route that avoided as many tight corners, traffic signals, and buildings as possible. Even so, 400 trees had to be removed to create sufficient clearance. On October 11, 2012 at midnight, Endeavour's historic road trip began. The shuttle was mounted on 4 self-propelled modular trailers, SPMTs, advanced multi-axle vehicles controlled by computers. These trailers allowed for exceptional stability and maneuverability, critical for navigating the shuttle through the bustling streets of Los Angeles. It took 2 full days to complete the journey, culminating in the shuttle's arrival at its permanent home at the California Science Center. While Endeavour had previously reached speeds of 17,500 miles per hour in space, this slow crawl through LA was an equally impressive feat of engineering and coordination. The sheer effort to transport a 122-foot-long spacecraft through a dense urban environment makes this one of the most mind-blowing transportation achievements ever. Whopping whale! It's not just gigantic inanimate objects like space shuttles and oil platforms that have been part of epic transportation feats. In January 1997, a week-old female grey whale was found stranded on the Southern California coast. Weak and vulnerable, rescuers decided to transport her to SeaWorld San Diego for rehabilitation, a monumental task in its own right. The young whale, later named JJ, measured 14 feet long and weighed a hefty 1,670 pounds. With the help of a group of determined beachgoers, JJ was carefully hoisted onto a 24-ton truck. To keep her hydrated during the 140-mile journey to SeaWorld, she was constantly doused with water. After a year of care at SeaWorld, JJ made an incredible recovery. She grew to a staggering 30 feet in length and gained an additional 9 tons, bringing her closer in size to a school bus. However, this posed a unique problem. The plan was always to release JJ back into the ocean, but transporting a creature of her size and weight was no small challenge. The rescue team devised a meticulous plan. JJ was gently lifted out of her tank using a custom-made sling and transferred to a 40-foot water-filled foam-padded trailer. Once securely in the trailer, a truck transported her from SeaWorld to a nearby harbor. There, JJ was moved onto the USCGC Conifer, a 180-foot buoy tender, for the final leg of her journey. Out at sea, JJ's stretcher was carefully lowered into the water. As soon as she was free, the whale took a deep breath and dove into the ocean, disappearing into the vast, dark waters of the Pacific. JJ's incredible rescue and release were a testament to the power of teamwork, ingenuity, and compassion. Who knew that moving a living being could be just as awe-inspiring as transporting colossal structures? Let's see what mammothy move is up next. Transformative Transport. In 2017, the McLaren Engineering Group undertook a jaw-dropping transportation mission, moving a heat recovery steam generator, HRSG, a critical component in power plants that captures waste heat from gas turbines. This wasn't your average delivery. Standing at an astonishing 130 feet tall and weighing a mind-boggling 4,000 tons, the HRSG was as tall as the Arc de Triomphe and as heavy as 70 average American homes. The challenge? Transporting this colossal cargo 130 miles from Rensselaer, New York, to a power plant in Sewaren, New Jersey. Predictably, the HRSG was far too tall to be transported over land. Instead, engineers opted for a watery route, navigating down the Hudson River. To start, the HRSG was loaded onto 5 self-propelled modular trailers, which carefully maneuvered the massive unit onto a 400-foot-long barge. Towed by 3 tugboats, the barge began its journey down the river. Despite the HRSG's size, it managed to squeeze under bridges along the route, with some clearances as tight as 9 feet. The shipment was so enormous that the barge displayed red and white marker lights to warn low-flying aircraft of its towering presence. After 36 painstaking hours on the water, traveling at a sluggish 5 miles per hour, the HRSG finally arrived at its destination in Sewaren. This mission was nothing short of monumental, showcasing human ingenuity in the face of a truly gigantic challenge. Now that's a heavyweight move. Lugging liberty. New York's iconic skyline is home to some of the world's most famous landmarks, including the Empire State Building, One World Trade Center, and the Statue of Liberty. But unlike the skyscrapers built in the Big Apple, Lady Liberty's journey began an ocean away. In the 1860s, French intellectual Édouard de la Boulaye proposed the idea of a statue to commemorate the 100th anniversary of US independence and the friendship between France and America. By 1876, French sculptor Frédéric-Auguste Bartholdi began constructing the now iconic statue. Completed in 1884, the 150-foot-tall, 225-ton copper and steel structure was a true marvel of its time. Then came the hard part: transporting the massive monument across the Atlantic. The 215-foot-long French frigate Isère was chosen for the mission. While the idea of sailing Lady Liberty upright across the ocean sounded dramatic, strong Atlantic winds posed a serious risk. Instead, the statue was carefully dismantled into 350 pieces and packed into 200 wooden crates for transport. Once the colossal cargo was secured, Isère set sail, taking 27 days to reach New York. From there, the crates were unloaded onto smaller vessels and ferried to Liberty Island, where the statue was reassembled on its pedestal. Finally, in 1886, the Statue of Liberty was unveiled, standing proud in the harbour, a symbol of freedom that had travelled thousands of miles to find its home. While Lady Liberty's journey was remarkable, she's not the only colossal statue to undergo a major move. In 13th century BCE Egypt, Pharaoh Ramses II oversaw the construction of the Abu Simbel complex, which included 2 massive temples and 4 towering statues of himself. Carved into a cliff face, the structure spanned 125 feet wide and 108 feet high, standing tall for over 3,000 years. But in the 1960s, the construction of the Aswan High Dam threatened to submerge the ancient site. Ingenious solutions were proposed to save the complex, including building a massive aquarium with underwater viewing chambers or raising the temples on hydraulic jacks. However, these ideas were either too costly or impractical. Ultimately, engineers decided to relocate the Abu Simbel complex to a nearby artificial hill. Starting in 1964, the temples were carefully cut into over 1,000 massive blocks, each weighing up to 30 tons. Specialized marble cutters were used to slice the monument into manageable pieces, which were then transported by crane and truck to a temporary storage site. Reassembly began soon after, and by 1968, the temples had been reconstructed on their new perch, 900 feet inland and 210 feet higher than their original location. Thanks to this extraordinary feat, the Abu Simbel complex was preserved for future generations, standing proudly in its elevated home. Talk about monumental moves. Both Lady Liberty and Abu Simbel prove that even the heaviest pieces of history can be carried forward. Rocky Road. If you thought transporting Abu Simbel piece by piece was a Herculean task, it's nothing compared to the monumental effort workers in 18th century Russia undertook. In the 1760s, the construction of the iconic Bronze Horseman statue began in St. Petersburg. To create its pedestal, a massive boulder known as the Thunderstone, discovered in the marshlands of Lakhta, was chosen. The problem? Lakhta was roughly 4 miles from St. Petersburg, and the technology of the time was far from modern cranes or trucks. This wasn't just any rock. The Thunderstone measured 46 feet long, 16 feet high, and tipped the scales at a staggering 1,600 tons. Moving it was no small feat, and 400 men were tasked with the challenge. Enter Marinos Carburis, the mastermind behind the operation. He waited for winter to arrive, allowing the frozen ground to become a natural sliding surface. Carburis invented a metal sled that ran along a track system. However, with only 300 feet of track available, workers constantly disassembled and relaid it as they progressed. To move the sled, 2 vertical axle machines, each operated by teams of more than 30 workers, turned continuously, inching the Thunderstone forward. Even with this setup, the team managed to move the boulder only about 500 feet per day. The real test came when they reached the Nevka River, which separated Lakhta from St. Petersburg. Crossing the water required transferring the massive boulder onto a barge mounted between 2 Russian Navy warships. After a short but nerve-wracking sail, the Thunderstone finally arrived in central St. Petersburg. 9 months of grueling work later, the pedestal was in place and the Bronze Horseman was completed. All that effort for a pedestal? 18th century Russia clearly had no chill when it came to making a statement. Pass to power. The bulky plane you're looking at is the CC-127 Globemaster III, a behemoth of the skies. Measuring 174 feet in length and weighing a hefty 28 tons, this aircraft is nearly twice the length and about as heavy as a blue whale. But while it's nowhere near as massive as the Thunderstone or Abu Simbel, what makes the moving of this plane truly incredible is that who did it. Back in 2009, one lone individual took on the task of pulling the CC-177 Globemaster. A bodybuilder? A strongman champion? Nope. It was Kevin Fast, a pastor from St. Paul's Lutheran Church in Canada. In an extraordinary display of strength and determination, Fast had the plane secured to a thick rope strapped to his body. With every ounce of power he could muster, the pastor leaned in and began pulling the 200-plus-ton aircraft. After an intense 76 seconds of heaving and hauling, Kevin managed to drag the colossal plane nearly 30 feet forward. This incredible feat was enough to land him a Guinness World Record and solidify his reputation as one of the world's strongest clergymen. Apparently, the only thing stronger than Pastor Kevin's faith is his jaw-dropping calf strength, building budge. If you've ever moved house, you know how stressful hauling all your belongings from one place to another can be. But even your worst moving day woes pale in comparison to a jaw-dropping building relocation that took place in Wuhan, China, back in 2016. This wasn't just a house, it was the Hanyang Fire Association, a massive 3-story historical building standing 111 feet tall and weighing a staggering 16,650 tons. The move wasn't a stylistic choice either. As part of major demolition projects in Wuhan, officials decided to relocate the historic structure rather than demolish it. But how do you move something so enormous? While precise details weren't made public, the process likely followed similar engineering marvels used in other building relocations. First, the structure was likely hollowed out and reinforced to withstand the stresses of movement. Hydraulic jacks then carefully elevated the building inch by inch until it rested on a set of 6 concrete tracks. With the building safely raised, engineers were able to slide it, 118 feet down the road. Though this move covered a distance barely longer than a basketball court, the operation was painstakingly slow, taking 11 days to complete. The engineers faced a delicate balance. Any misstep could compromise the historic building's structural integrity. So, the next time you're groaning about packing boxes or loading a moving van, just remember, at least you're not relocating a 16,000-ton piece of history. Lengthy load. Feast your eyes on this behemoth. What you're looking at is a giant splitter vessel, an industrial powerhouse used in the petrochemical industry to aid the refining of oil and gas. This particular splitter measures an incredible 315 feet in length and weighs over 800 tons. For perspective, that's about the same length as 18 limousines and the weight of 4 Boeing 747-400s. Talk about a massive load. This gigantic piece of equipment was traveling from Edmonton, Canada to the Heartland Petrochemical Complex in Fort Saskatchewan, a distance of roughly 15 miles. While this might sound like a straightforward journey, moving a colossal splitter is anything but simple. Add to that the challenge of moving it in January, and the conditions become even trickier. With icy, slippery roads, the team had to employ extra precautions. The splitter was loaded onto 2 double 26 SHA intercombi trailers, and to move it, 2 trucks pulled it from the front, while 4 more pushed from behind. Given the size of the load and the freezing temperatures, the splitter, which occupied the entire width of a 2-lane highway, made its way at a careful 9 mph, slower still when navigating sharp turns. The route was chosen along Alberta's high-load corridor, a specialized network of roads designed for hauling oversized equipment, featuring wider lanes and fewer obstacles. After 3 days of steady progress, the enormous splitter finally reached its destination at the Heartland Petrochemical Complex. It's a perfect example of how sometimes slow and steady truly does win the race. A fairly large move. In April 2014, tragedy struck when the MV Sewol, a passenger ferry traveling to Jindo Island, South Korea, capsized after making a sharp turn while battling strong currents. The disaster claimed hundreds of lives and left the wreckage submerged beneath the sea for years. It wasn't until 3 years later that efforts began to salvage the massive wreck. At the time of the incident, the vessel weighed over 6,800 tons and was carrying an additional 3,600 tons of cargo. Pulling nearly 10,000 tons from the sea was no easy feat. The first challenge was positioning 2 huge barges on either side of the wreck. Workers then dug through the seabed below the ferry to install beams and attach cables to a hydraulic jack system on the barges. These cables were used to pull the ship sideways to the surface. Once the seawall was partially raised, the real heavy lifting began with the Hyundai 10,000 floating crane, a colossal piece of machinery designed for extreme tasks. This crane, with its 590-foot-long booms and 13-foot-high backstay supports, was equipped with 64 wire ropes attached to the ferry. The crane gradually tilted and pulled the ferry upright, using slow, precise movements to keep the ship from breaking apart. This operation was a massive undertaking. While it may not have been the longest transport mission we've seen, the sight of a massive vessel being hauled up from the ocean depths by such a colossal crane is an awe-inspiring feat of engineering. The seawall was eventually uprighted and later taken away for investigation and dismantling. Boat boost. We couldn't talk about sea-based supermovers without mentioning a remarkable vessel, the lift boat. Now, before you start imagining some sort of magical contraption, let me clarify. It's an ingenious piece of technology that can elevate itself out of the water. These boats are designed like any other at sea, but the difference lies in their pipe legs. These long, sturdy limbs, usually 3 or 4, can extend as deep as 220 feet into the water. Controlled by a hydraulic jacking system, these legs are lowered to the seabed, where they either attach to a pre-built platform or anchor directly into the ground. The real magic happens when the boat's hull, which would typically sit at the water's surface, is raised several hundred feet into the air. By lifting the hull, the boat becomes a stable, elevated platform that can be used for offshore construction and maintenance, often on oil and gas platforms. This elevation gives the lift boat the ability to handle rough seas while still providing a steady working surface. So while these boats may not be a product of black magic, their unique ability to stand above the water certainly makes them stand out and as a fascinating example of maritime engineering. Big Bully. The Bullwinkle oil platform is a colossal structure found in the Gulf of Mexico, standing an impressive 380 feet above the water's surface. But that's just the start of it. Underwater, this massive platform extends 1,353 feet below the waves, making its total height more than 1,700 feet. For perspective, that's nearly as tall as the One World Trade Center. Constructed in 1989 in Texas, the Bullwinkle platform was built on a jacket that weighed a staggering 50,000 tons, approximately 7 times the mass of the Eiffel Tower. Once completed, the real challenge was moving this enormous piece of machinery out to the Gulf of Mexico. To transport this giant, as a custom-built barge measuring 853 feet long was required. The Bullwinkle was loaded onto the barge, and the 4 tugboats pulled it a distance of 380 miles and through the Gulf to its final destination. Once it arrived, the next phase was to launch Bullwinkle from the barge. Workers climbed the semi-submerged structure to activate the hydraulic systems. This involved opening flood valves to fill the platform's hollow legs with water, allowing it to sink 1,350 feet to settle on the ocean floor. The entire operation was an extraordinary feat of engineering and precision. Moving this massive structure to the deep waters of the Gulf of Mexico wasn't just about size, it was about ensuring stability and safety for its permanent placement. All in all, the Bullwinkle was a mammoth task for those involved, and those who took part truly had to be on their Bullwinkle to get the job done. Concrete cargo. Located off the coast of Newfoundland, Canada, the Hebron gravity-based structure, GBS, is a colossal engineering feat designed to extract oil from the Hebron oil field. Gravity-based structures are anchored to the seafloor by their tremendous weight, and the Hebron GBS is no exception. Standing at 390 feet tall and weighing over 650,000 tons, this massive concrete structure is a critical component for oil extraction in the region. The Hebron GBS is composed of over 4.5 million cubic feet of concrete, enough to fill more than 50 Olympic swimming pools. Its primary purpose is to provide stability for the oil platform above. After its construction in a dry dock, it had to be transported to its final location in the Jean Bassin, a site 220 miles off the coast. Moving such a massive and dense structure required a Herculean effort. The GBS was towed by several tugboats, traveling at a crawl speed of no faster than 3 mph. With its size and weight, the journey took over 2 weeks to complete. A key feature of the design was a quan, a large, hollow, watertight structure which kept the GBS buoyant as it was towed across the sea. Once the GBS reached its destination, water was pumped into the structure, gradually sinking it to its final resting place on the ocean floor. This intricate operation ensured the platform would be stable and ready to support the oil extraction equipment above. Today, the Hebron GBS is responsible for pumping out 15,000 barrels of oil per day, making it a mega move that has certainly paid off in the long run. Moving such a massive structure to its location was no easy task, but the successful completion of the project marked a significant achievement in offshore oil drilling. H2GO. In January 2012, the land transport company Al-Miji undertook one of the most ambitious terrestrial transport operations ever attempted. They were tasked with moving a massive water desalination unit, a facility that converts salt water into drinking water. This was no ordinary unit, measuring over 400 feet long, 110 feet wide, and 40 feet high. It was nearly the size of a football field. Weighing in at an astounding 5,400 tons, it was far too large for typical transportation methods. The journey began overseas, with the unit being transported on a 475-foot vessel from South Korea to the port of Ras Al Lara in southeastern Saudi Arabia. Upon arrival, the task of moving this giant onto land fell to a self-propelled modular transporter, SPMT, an enormous vehicle equipped with 172 axles and 688 double-width tires, designed to carry a load exceeding 7,300 tons. The SPMT slowly rolled the desalination unit off the vessel, and the real challenge began: transporting the structure over 4 miles to the Ras Al Lara desalination plant. But the operation didn't stop with just one unit. In total, 8 of these massive desalination units were moved to the plant, adding up to over 40,000 tons of equipment. By the time the plant was finished in 2014, it could produce 228 million gallons of drinking water per day, enough to provide for 3.5 million people. This mammoth operation not only delivered water, but provided a crucial resource to an entire region. H2GO is a reminder of the sheer scale and precision involved in such monumental transport missions. Moving these water desalination units was a mega move that required meticulous planning, cutting-edge technology, and an immense workforce. The success of the project was a triumph in the field of large-scale logistics.